jab for all aged care workers. And while aged care providers are mostly supportive of the new directive, there's some anger regarding the lack of consultation in the decision-making process.
Joining us from Canberra is CEO of Leading Age Services Australia, Sean Rooney. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
It's a pleasure to speak to you. Are you on board with the mandatory vaccinations? I understand you have a few reservations.
Well, look, not reservations. What we've said all along is that it needs to be the national priority to do all we can to keep older people in aged care homes safe and also the people that care for them. And in doing so, we need to take direction from the medical and scientific experts. So they have now come forward to say it should be mandatory for aged care workers to be vaccinated. It's a decision that they've looked at a couple of times before. And as you know, we learned from the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday night that that will now be the case. And so we're working through with the government, with aged care operators and with aged care workers, how we do this efficiently, effectively and safely.
It's pretty remarkable when you look at the stats that only about a third of aged care workers have been vaccinated. And from what I've read, it feels like that a lot of those aged care workers are feeling left behind. They were supposed to be in the 1A rollout from the federal government. What happened there?
Look, that's right. We know in the original vaccination program, aged care home residents and aged care home staff were 1A, front of the queue. Now, the program to deliver those vaccinations into aged care homes was struggled in fits and starts. Thankfully, it got up to speed, and now pretty well all residents in aged care homes have received their second vaccination, which is great because that's great protection for them. But unfortunately, as that program rolled out, staff felt as though they were being left behind. And now that's what we're trying to address in working with government is, as I said, what's the best way that we can get all staff vaccinated to ensure that they're protected and that the people they care for are also kept as safe as possible.
They're essentially being told that they need to get a jab before September, otherwise they need to look for another job. Is that fair?
Well,
how can we get more of these jabs into the arms of aged care workers?
Well, look, what we've spoken to government about yesterday is we need to look at new ways or more channels for those aged care workers who do a fantastic job. I mean, let's be honest, they get up every day to do the best job they possibly can in sometimes challenging circumstances and sometimes with limited resources. So we need to support them as best as we can. We've recommended to government that the on-site vaccination teams, so the teams coming to visit the aged care homes to vaccinate residents, that should be one of the primary channels now for aged care workers to be vaccinated, and also to use the registered nurses that are on site on aged care homes, assuming that they are appropriately accredited to deliver immunisation. We need to find a better way to utilise that workforce to be able to vaccinate staff.
Do you know, Sean, if anything will constitute a valid health exemption?
Well, look, mandatory vaccinations in aged care homes are not new. We do it from time to time for seasonal influenza. And in those circumstances, there are always exemptions for health and other reasons. So that was one of the questions we put to government yesterday. We're still waiting for a response as to what, supports would be put in place for staff and for those that are unable to be vaccinated. How do we ensure that we can continue to have them doing vital work in our sector?
Is there a hesitancy among aged care workers to get the COVID vaccine, or is it simply just a case of the rollout being completely stuffed up?
Look, I think problems with the rollout program has certainly led to the lower numbers of staff being vaccinated. And we know in the general community there's some concern around the vaccine, or predominantly the AstraZeneca hesitancy, for want of a better term. And we appreciate that some workers may have some concerns, and that's why we've got to focus on doing all we can to keep older Australians safe, but also to support those staff. And that's why we've recommended to government that for aged care workers, it should be the Pfizer should be the only vaccine made available to them, given that that will be the way to get them immunised the quickest, because there's only 3 weeks between the two jabs. And if any worker has concerns or hesitancy, we'll sit down with them and walk them through to be able to make sure that they're confident with respect to being vaccinated.
Yeah, aged care workers do an incredible job looking after the most vulnerable people in our community. That's
Would there be a concern that you could lose staff on the back of this, Sean?
Well, this is one of the things that we did raise with government. I mean, the last thing we want is for any current aged care worker, and as you said, Sarah, you know, they just fantastic people, do a great job. We don't want people to feel that they're not able to do the job that they love. And so we put to government, the last thing we want is to have an aged care home which is short staffed. So we need to make sure that there are provisions in place to avoid that at all costs, because we don't want to compromise care, because that's what they're there for, is to care for the older people in those homes.
Appreciate your time, Sean Rooney. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks very much.
Stay safe.
Well, science